Andrew Urquhart with you on the program today, and somebody who's not on air today, Bjorn Brickle from Life FM's Morning Wake Up. He's on his way to the top of the world, heading to Mount Everest Base Camp to raise funds for the very good work of Orphans Aid. We'll be getting reports back from him, and it's become quite the superhighway, actually, the road to Everest Base Camp. So many people are wanting to say, you know what? Let's throw some money at the problem. I want to get to Everest, or at least to base camp. There's been such a tourism boom for Nepal, but hey, back in the day, this was one of the last big challenges in the world. And of course, the guy on our $5 bill, Sir Edmund Hillary, from a little old country called New Zealand, he was the first in the world to get to the top of Everest, or was he? Bit of a controversy around this one now with a recent gruesome discovery. Joining me on the program now, John Peachey. JP, kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora. Sorry, am I your recent gruesome discovery? I just need to clarify that.
Well, no, we'll get to the gruesome discovery in just a moment.
Right.
But firstly, I wanted to know, is it on your bucket list? Everest, top of the world? Is it something that you aspired to do? Climb every mountain like they sang in Sound of Music?
Well, when people have seen the video version of our conversations, you'll see that I have a picture of Everest and Sir Edmund Hillary.
Exactly.
And an 80-year-old ice axe sitting on my wall.
Exactly.
So yes, it has been in my in my bucket list for quite a long time. Physically, am I able to do that? Yeah, it's a very, very demanding thing. So I admire Bjorn for having a crack at it, because it's a crazy business over there. So many people die on the mountain now. It's really, really quite crazy. So, yeah, one of those things. But the story which has unfolded this week, this kind of final chapter, or well, maybe penultimate chapter, is fascinating, because this is actually a workshop I do for leaders, and it's about the 1924 attempt to climb Everest by a guy called George Lee Mallory. It is an absolutely fascinating story. His climbing partner was a very young man, 22-year-old guy called Sandy Irvine, who was a MacGyver, really. He was kind of good with the tools and invention and imagination, and his job was to make sure that Mallory got to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
But two guys attempting Everest in 1924, 30 years before, as you mentioned, our own Sir Edmund Hillary. And it is a controversy because there is evidence that Mallory made it.
Wow.
And to cut a long story short, on the 31st of May, 1999, an American climber called Conrad Anker found the petrified body of George Lee Mallory some 800 feet below the summit of Everest. And he had broken legs. There was no way he could have survived the fall. Sandy Irvine's body has never been found technically, although the Chinese apparently rumored to have found the body, but it looks like that was untrue, because now a part of Irvine's body has been found.
It's a bit of the grisly thing is it's a boot with a foot in it, and it's got Sandy Irvine's name embroidered into the sock. So if you couldn't get a more positive ID, really. His mum stitched the name into his socks before he went to climb the mountain. Exactly,
and that's with George Mallory, his climbing partner, same thing. And the back of his short was his George Mallory's initials and name. And one of the fascinating things, Andrew, is when they turned over Mallory's body, his body was virtually perfectly intact and preserved.
Wow.
And it was literally frozen like a stone. And they found documents in his pocket proving who he was, perfectly legible receipts and letters. But the controversy was that he had a photo of his wife, Ruth, in his top pocket, supposedly, that he was going to leave on the summit of the mountain.
Oh.
And that photograph was missing. So there's conjecture. But they found oxygen bottles really high up the mountain that were consistent with the 1920s. There was a whole raft of ideas. They found it was either Mallory's or Irvine's climbing axe, ice axe, higher than that. So, I mean, it's an really interesting tale. And of course, the crazy thing now is when you climb Everest, there's ropes and ladders all the way up the mountain.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's a walk in the park,
no.
Far from that. But there are ropes and there are ladders all the way up the mountain. The Chinese took a large ladder up there a number of years ago when the Hillary Steps were still intact. The Hillary Steps, named, of course, after Sir Edmund, are gone now. They were destroyed in an earthquake. These guys climbed with cotton ropes and rudimentary clothing.
Wow.
An unbelievable tough men. They went really, literally boldly went when no man had gone before. Because in 1924, they didn't even know how to get to the mountain. We know where it is now. Bjorn knows where base camp is.
Yep.
Back then, they didn't even know where that was. But I think it's a fascinating story. It crosses over into faith, really. God asks us to go places where there are no ropes.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
We're asked to go places where there's no safety ropes. Is that actually, he wants us to venture out and to trust him in the situation. But this is. I mean, I'm very sad but very pleased that part of Irvine's body has been found. He was remarkable. The year that he climbed Everest, he'd already rowed in the Oxford, the big rowing race.
Yep.
Was it Canterbury and Oxford?
Mm-hmm. Cambridge and Oxford, yeah.
Cambridge and Oxford. He climbed Spitsbergen. It's one of the tallest mountains in Europe. He was a remarkable young man. Mallory was 38. He was a bit older, but he had a couple of kids at home. He had a lot to lose. And so, it is a mystery and an adventure. And I do this workshop about this mystery itself. So.
Interested to get your thoughts on this, because honestly, my initial reaction, and this is possibly not as gracious as I could be, JP, typical POMs, isn't it? Like, we've got one thing that we're first at, one thing that we're good at. The guy's on our $5 bill, for goodness sake. He is our national hero, that from little old New Zealand, we got to the top of the world first. And now the POMs have gone and wrecked it for us. It's like the Welsh trying to say that they've got a steeper street than Baldwin Street in Dunedin. And they were proved wrong as well. I don't want to start a conspiracy theory, John, but is this just the POMs wanting to say, oh, no, us first?
Well, let me tell you what Ed Hillary said himself and what is held within the climbing community. Simply, it doesn't count if you don't come down.
Okay.
You don't get runs on the board if you don't return to base camp. And that's the way that the climbing community, harsh though it might sound. But the fascinating thing for me is, and this is one of the things that I've looked at with the life of Hillary, even if Hillary wasn't the first, we think he was the first.
Yeah.
Even if he wasn't the first, actually Hillary's life doesn't change, because Hillary was actually disgruntled 3 days after. This is fascinating for me. 3 days after climbing the mountain, he wrote to his mother. Hillary writes to his mum saying, well, I might not have brought a lot of joy into the world, but at least I've made the Hillary name a bit more famous.
Yeah.
I mean, he was, in a sense, he was bitterly disappointed that he's done this great thing, as he said, quote unquote, knocked the bastard off.
Yep.
That's what he said. But where he found his joy and his purpose and his meaning was serving the Nepalese people.
Yep.
And a 50-year love affair of serving people is how Hillary found his value. And so even if he hadn't been the first, it made absolutely no difference to the character of who the man was. And I think that's a critical thing in the story. But no, the POMs can't claim it.
No.
They can't. There's no evidence that they did get there. A lot of evidence that, and I think I even say about Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, the 10,000 steps between base camp and the top of Everest counts for nothing. It's only that very, very last step that makes the difference.
Yeah.
That gets records, and getting down again. And oh no, you can tell I'm a bit like a kid in the candy store here.
Oh,
it's a great story.
Exactly. And hey, there and back again. An old foot in a boot doesn't count, guys. A nice try, but our $5 bill guy is still very much on top of the world. Fascinating story, JP. Thanks very much for sharing with us today.
My pleasure, man.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.